This spring, just a few days before Congress enacted the last continuing resolution, which is a spending plan, this resolution that would extend the Biden-era spending levels, President Trump said in a speech that he wanted to do something that hadn't been done in over 20 years, balance the budget. I fully commend him for that and am very supportive of trying to get there. The difficulty is that the spending levels we voted on in March and the spending levels we will vote on again this week don't balance the budget and don't come anywhere close. These are the spending levels that Biden put in place in December before he left office. Most Republicans were critical and condemnatory, and many conservative Republicans like myself voted against these spending levels because they were such that they would lead to a $2 trillion deficit. Well, that is still true. This year the deficit will be right around $2 trillion, and it's because we've continued the Biden spending levels. To balance the budget, Congress needs a much stronger response than the legislation being presented. Critics of excessive federal spending have rightly argued that Congress should return to pre-pandemic levels of spending. When the pandemic came in, spending went through the roof. The economy was shut down. They wrote free checks to all the Americans. Problem is all that was borrowed. There was no money. There was no rainy day fund. Now, there is a way to tackle the budget and to try to balance the budget over time. I have a penny plan budget that I've been introducing for several years. We have not gotten any Democrat support, but we've gotten over half of the Republicans to support it. My penny plan would balance over about a 5-year period and would return spending almost immediately to what would be a pre-pandemic level. 6 months ago, though, when the current continuing resolution was passed, Republicans were told that we were just clearing the decks. This was going to be temporary, and that we would be then bold and present budgets that would be cutting spending. Once President Trump was in office, with a Republican majority in the Senate and the House, we would finally address spending levels. And would you know it, getting serious about a balanced budget is not on the agenda this week. There really isn't any serious change. What we're talking about is a continuing resolution that continues the Biden spending levels. These spending levels this year have led to almost $2 trillion in deficit and are projected next year to lead to $2.1 trillion in deficit. In addition, we will also be voting on something called an automatic continuing resolution proposal. This is the idea that rather than government shut down, it would just continue spending the same amount of money. In theory, I like the concept. I just don't really like continuing Biden-era spending levels because they never balance, not over 5 years, not over 10 years, really never. The lines never cross. So sure, you would keep government open, but you would keep government open and spending the same amount we do currently, which is out of control and not defensible. So keeping the government open while continuing $2 trillion deficits hardly seems desirable. Rather than the relentless fury to tackle the debt, which is what we were promised with a Republican majority, the powers that be have once again waved the white flag of surrender by failing to present the American people with legislation that would make the cuts necessary to balance the budget. Under the proposed continuing resolution, or the automatic continuing resolution we will vote on tonight, the budget never balances. Even if you take it out as far as the eye can see, revenue will never meet expenditures. So it's just not something I can support, and I don't think it's a conservative proposal. Spending has gotten so out of control that this freeze, even over a decade, doesn't put a dent in the deficit. Presidents of both parties pay lip service to the idea that the national debt must be addressed, and yet it gets worse under both parties. People ask me, whose fault is it, Republicans or Democrats? And I just say yes. It's both parties. The right wants unlimited spending for the military, the left wants unlimited spending for welfare, and so you have guns and butter. And you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours, and it all goes up. Now, the reverse compromise could happen. You could actually cut a little bit from the military side and a little bit from the welfare side, and really everybody would get a little bit of a haircut across the board, and you could balance your budget that way. But you can't exclude or exempt huge swaths of government spending. You have to look at all spending. And if you do, the budget can be balanced by a 6% cut across the board, excluding Social Security. I am proud of the president for what he's tried to do, though. Unlike past presidents, Donald Trump has created the Department of Government Efficiency to identify and eliminate waste. DOGE has found billions of dollars of waste. Americans were rightfully appalled when they were told that your government's been spending $2 million on sex changes in Guatemala. I mean, it sounds like a bad punchline you might hear on late night comics. $2 million on sex changes in Guatemala. Your government was spending that money, and the DOGE people came in and said we shouldn't do it. Now, I've been talking about these things for years, but finally we had an administration that was interested in it. $25,000 for an LGBT opera in Colombia, and nearly $1 million to study the microaggressions among obese Latinx, whatever that means. But just crazy wasted money. I mean, it'd be one thing if it was even a surplus. These are crazy wastes of money. But we're doing this. We have to borrow the money from China to send it on all these crazy projects around the world. This doesn't even account the $200 billion we've sent to Ukraine. That's all borrowed as well. This summer, President Trump sent Congress a special message identifying $9.4 billion in rescissions. And Congress, for the first time in a long time, did the right thing. We voted for and passed this rescission package to cut $9 billion. I supported, as I always do, cutting this foreign aid. With a deficit of $2 trillion a year, though, $9 billion is a drop in the bucket. We've got to do more. Congress has to do more. And as much as I appreciate this, the power of the purse needs to be exerted more by Congress. We've let so many of these decision-making powers devolve to the president. The founders, I think, would be appalled with Congress. They'd be appalled with what Congress has become. Congress exerts no powers, gives away its powers, and does not seek a restoration of its power. Right now, we're living under emergency rule, where the president has declared emergencies on 160 countries and has declared that he has the right to declare whatever he wants through import taxes. Well, our founding fathers would be appalled. The Constitution's very clear. Taxes originate in Congress, and even more specifically, taxes originate in the House of Representatives. Unfortunately, Congress has all been all too happy to wither in the shadow of the presidency that grows larger with each successive administration. Whether it be Republican or Democrat, the presidency grows larger and stronger. To wit, the continuing resolution that we're considering, the spending plan that we're considering, maintains the Biden spending levels. So if you remember there was an election, you remember the Republicans all said, Bidenomics and Biden inflation and Biden spending were against all that. That was kind of what the election was decided on. And now you have a Republican in the White House, Republicans in the Senate, Republicans in the House, and we're living under the Biden spending levels that they complained about. The great irony is the Democrats have now switched. The Democrats supported the Biden spending levels under President Biden. Now there's a President Trump and the spending levels are exactly the same. All the Democrats are voting no. It makes no sense at all. It is really ironic that every Democrat senator supported the spending levels just 9 months ago that we're voting on now. So when they say continuing resolution, we're continuing the same spending levels that we started with in December of last year, and every Democrat voted for them. Likewise, in December of last year, conservative Republicans voted against the Biden spending levels. And now they're poised to vote for the Biden spending levels. Both parties have completely flip-flopped to the opposite side of the same issue that hasn't changed. Congress has truly entered the upside-down world. To add insult to irony, the CR before us adds the foreign aid dollars we canceled 2 months ago back into the baseline spending. So we finally, for the first time, and as long as I can remember, had a vote to get rid of this crazy foreign aid, this foreign welfare. We did the right thing. We got rid of $9 billion. There's still another 40-some-odd billion in the budget. We got rid of $9 billion. By voting on this continuing resolution today, they're sticking the foreign aid back in. The foreign aid will be back part of the baseline again, and we got to go through the whole thing again. It's almost as if DOGE never existed, as if DOGE never found all of this stuff, criticized it, shamed Congress into doing the right thing, and we cut the foreign aid. It's going back in. So we're going to do a CR that doesn't lessen the foreign aid spending. It's going to have the same level of foreign aid spending that we had last year. I'm not going to fall for this trick, and conservatives shouldn't either. As Jefferson tells us, our job is to be eternally vigilant. What the country needs is a bipartisan effort in Congress to reclaim the power of the purse and to do what is necessary to eliminate duplicative spending, wasteful spending, and spend only what we can afford. We have some programs here that were begun 40 years ago, authorized, and people said, we're going to solve the problem of homelessness. 40 years ago, the programs haven't been reauthorized, and we just continue living on. And then every year or so, someone will go, wow, we have a homeless problem. Why don't we get another government program to build homes? They did this in California recently. They spent $27 billion over a 7-year period. You know what the average unit cost for the affordable housing was? $1 million a unit. That's the history of government, the incompetence of government, that they're going to build houses for poor people, and it turned out costing them $1 million a unit to build houses for poor people. Just 2 weeks ago, a majority of the Republican caucus actually did vote for my 6-penny plan. The penny plan, as I've said, is to cut spending across the board. It's how we would actually finally balance the budget, is this compromise that everything needs a little bit of a haircut. Unfortunately, we've gotten no Democrat support for it, but we also have gotten about a third. We got a little over half the caucus, but probably a little over a third, 40% of the caucus is still believing that we should just keep spending levels as they are or continue to increase spending. So we're not quite there yet. There's not quite enough fear of where we are. But $37 trillion in debt is not something to be sneezed at. You know, we're adding at $2 trillion a year. The interest alone is about $1 trillion. Some people have made the argument that a country can no longer remain strong when its interest payment on its debt exceeds its actual spending to defend itself, the military spending. So I think we're really at a tipping point. Everybody comes to us for money. Everybody's got their hand out. Everybody wants more out of us. You know, from Israel to Israel's neighbors, everybody's got their hand out. Everybody wants more money from us. And I think it makes no sense for us to be borrowing it from China to give it to other countries, no matter how good the request is. So the plans that have been presented before us, we had 2 plans presented, a Republican plan and a Democrat plan. Which one adds debt? Yes, both of them. The Republican plan will add $2 trillion in debt next year if we continue spending at the same level. The Democrat plan said we want another trillion on top of that, so it would be a $3 trillion deficit next year. So neither party is serious about this, but there is an alternative when we get enough Republicans, and that's the penny plan that I've been offering for several years. It balances it by gradually reducing spending just a little bit each year. But by supporting yet another continuing resolution at the current spending levels, Republicans are essentially signing off on the fiscal policies of the Biden administration. Policies Republicans once rightly opposed. Just a short time ago, virtually every Republican was saying the Biden spending levels were too high. But given that this continuing resolution will add another $2 trillion deficit next year, this plan, the Biden levels, should be a non-starter. However, the legislation before us today is being presented as a solution to dysfunction, but in reality is just papering over the cracks. This measure is not a reversal of the status quo. It is the status quo. It does nothing to address our debt. It does nothing to divert our trajectory that is bankrupting this nation. This is not some theoretical debate. This is math. This is what will happen. This is what happened last year and is going to happen again, $2 trillion in additional debt. We bring in about $4.7 trillion, we send $6.7 trillion. We're spending $2 trillion more than comes in. This isn't like an emergency. This isn't even the excuse of the pandemic. This is routine business, routine status quo, $2 trillion in deficit every year. And if we stay on this path, if we keep spending like we did during the pandemic or under the Biden administration, we are guaranteeing a future of higher inflation and crippling debt for our children and grandchildren. We're running out of ways to fix this. We're running out of time. The CBO projects that within the next 10 years, that mandatory spending, this is all the welfare programs, and interest alone will exceed revenue. We're getting pretty close to that now, so think about that. We vote on a budget that's not mandatory spending. Military spending is considered to be discretionary, and then there's a bunch of discretionary welfare. Military is a little bit more than the welfare. That's the budget we vote on. But then you have mandatory spending, which is Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, food stamps, and then interest on the debt. That essentially is equal to what comes in. The taxes that are coming in equal the mandatory spending. So when we actually do produce a budget, which isn't very often, the stuff we are spending is almost entirely borrowed. So if you look at the discretionary spending budget, it's about $1.8, $1.9 trillion. That's the debt. That's what the debt is. The debt is essentially equivalent to the discretionary spending. So the mandatory programs, the welfare programs have gotten so big and they grow with such abundance each year. And we've added in healthy, young, healthy, able-bodied people to these programs that really shouldn't be on welfare. You've added these people in, and it's consuming all of your taxes. So there's really, everything else is being borrowed. Entitlement programs and interest will consume every single dollar within a year or two that comes in tax revenue. Imagine if you were running your household that way. No money left for food, clothing, shelter unless you take out a loan every single year forever. That's what we're doing. You really can't live that way. You can borrow if you want to borrow to buy a house, but the bank holds the house. But you don't borrow money to pay rent for your apartment. You don't borrow money to pay for your groceries. You have to actually earn that money and have enough for your daily living expenses. We're to the point where we're borrowing for the daily living expenses of government. My amendment that I have offered to this would take the automatic renewal that prevents us from shutting down, take the automatic renewal and put in the penny plan numbers, so what you would actually have is not running the government at the same level, at the Biden levels. You would actually reduce spending by 6%. I'm fine to make it automatic. I'm fine to let it kick in and go on so we don't shut the government down and we avoid the chaos and the discomfort of having government shut down, but we shouldn't keep spending the same amount of money. That would be like abdicating our duty just to spend the same amount. But if we were to use my penny plan budget, we would be returning to pre-pandemic spending levels, a significant cut, and it would put us on the path to balancing our budget within 5 years. The government, though, has lost sight of its priorities. The American people are the ones paying the price. The big spenders don't tell you the truth. They don't tell you that it's all borrowed. They don't tell you that you're being ripped off by inflation. They don't tell you that, well, gosh, we're going to give you all this stuff, but it has a cost. Really, nothing really is free in life. There is really not any possibility of getting something for nothing. What you get from government through borrowed money, you pay for through inflated prices. The inflation of the Biden years didn't go away. Over the last 3 or 4 years in the grocery store, a lot of the meat and the different items in the grocery store went up 20%. When they say inflation is slowing down, that means we're just not adding more to it. But if you don't make 20% more than you made 4 years ago, you're being ripped off. You're being ripped off by inflation. It wasn't that long ago that my colleagues, at least on this side of the aisle, stood united in opposition to this fiscal recklessness. It wasn't that long ago that we drew a line in the sand on debt and the debt ceiling, that we demanded spending caps, that we said we wouldn't mortgage our children's future to fund today's political convenience. Now some seem content to roll over and lock in the very policies that we ran against. I won't do that. And I won't urge my colleagues to do that either. We can't claim to be fiscal conservatives while voting for more and more debt. We can't claim to be this great opposition to the Biden spending levels and then vote the Biden spending levels in. We can't claim to not like deficit spending and then vote for spending that will inevitably lead to another $2 trillion in debt next year. This country can't afford to write another blank check. We can't afford to lock in the fiscal mistakes of the past. We need real reform. We need it now. We need to return to the principles of limited constitutional government. If we obeyed the Constitution, most of the nonsense, most of the spending that goes on up here really isn't authorized under the Constitution. If we return to the Constitution, the principles of limited government, responsible budgeting, and economic freedom, we'd have a balanced budget again. We need to start today.